The U.S. Justice Department and the Federal Trade Commission have been looking into Google's possible anti-competitive practices. So how will its massive purchase of Motorola Mobility impact those investigations? For one view, let's turn to Palo Alto and Silicon Valley antitrust lawyer and expert Gary Reback of Carr Ferrell. Gary, welcome back to Bloomberg West. I really am excited to hear your perspective on this today. How do you think regulators are going to view this massive acquisition by Google?
Well, first of all, Emily, there's going to be a significant antitrust investigation of the acquisition itself. And as your last interview indicated, there's going to be an enormous delay while the antitrust enforcement authorities think about the impact of this acquisition on all the various markets it affects. But even more fundamentally than that, Google massively increases its market power by buying this huge patent portfolio, and that's going to increase the pressure on the Federal Trade Commission and on the states and on the Europeans to do something about the anti-competitive allegations surrounding Google.
Gary, how long do you think this investigation could take, and how do you expect the deal to play out? Are regulators going to approve this?
Well, I think it's too early to say what is going to happen to the deal because there's still a bunch of moving business parts, as your last interview indicated. I mean, what's going to happen to the handset business, for example? Then there's the set-top box business. The small cable guys can't be happy about this deal. They're all kinds of business considerations that have to be nailed down before the antitrust enforcement authorities can even take a hard look at the deal. So final evaluation of the deal, I think, is quite a ways off. But in the meantime, the FTC investigation is going to steam right ahead, and they're working already very hard on it, and I think they're going to redouble their efforts in light of what Google is doing.
Now, already we know the FTC, has an antitrust investigation of Google underway in terms of search and Android. We would have expected Google to kind of back off on deals like this, but now we're seeing, its largest acquisition ever. Why is Google pushing the envelope here?
Well, I think there are two reasons. One is, I think even Google knows that the antitrust enforcement authorities are going to come down sooner or later. And so they're extending as far as they can in anticipation of being pushed back in various places. So that's one reason. The second reason is that this mobile platform has the potential, if somebody else controlled it, of eroding Google's monopoly power in search. So they're trying to do whatever they can to make sure that doesn't happen, including paying billions of dollars for a patent portfolio to solidify their market power.
Now, you have said that Google has a monopoly in search. Does that translate to mobile search as well with a deal like this?
The two segments are different markets, but what we know already is that Google's share from reports in mobile search is even higher than its share in desktop search. Now, heretofore, the investigations in Europe and in the United States have focused on Google's monopoly share in desktop. But you're also going to see, I think, increasing scrutiny of what's going on in terms of Android and all the lawsuits that's precipitated, including the Skyhook lawsuit in Boston. You're going to see increased scrutiny of the mobile platform and Google's market share in search on that platform.
Now, obviously, Google has a top legal team working for them. They still didn't hesitate to go forward with this deal. What do you imagine Google is doing behind the scenes to appease regulators, if you will?
Well, I think the first consideration from their perspective is the business consideration. As I said earlier, I think they're going to do whatever they think they can get away with for as long as they can, whatever their lawyers tell them in the short run. In the interim, though, I'm sure they're going to tell the FTC that they'll cooperate fully in the investigation. They'll make it clear they'll cooperate fully in any antitrust investigation of the deal itself. Those are really just PR words. I don't think they really make that much difference. Google is going to do whatever it can to enhance its market power in the short term.
Gary, how is all of this impacting Google's reputation in Washington?
Well, that's a very good question. I think the last year has been a tough year for Google in Washington. As you know, Emily, there's a Senate subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee that's going to have a session in September just on Google's conduct. And so you're going to be hearing a lot more about that. Google recently has hired, I think, a dozen lobbying firms to try to stem the tide of bad publicity in Washington. So I think their persona in Washington is taking an enormous beating, and I don't think this particular deal is going to help all that much.
Gary, I think I know how you're going to answer this question, but should we be afraid of Google's power?
Well, think about this deal, Emily. I mean, we're already afraid of Google tracking us whenever we do a search on our computer. Now, through this Motorola deal, they're going to control set-top boxes. Do you think they're going to track us in terms of the television shows we watch? I mean, that would be horrifying, but it's entirely consistent with what we've done or what they've done in the past. So I think there's good reason for concern, and there's going to be even more concern as a result of this deal.
It will be interesting to see what Google attempts to do next. All right, Gary Reback of Carr Ferrell, always great to have your perspective here on Bloomberg West. Thanks for joining us.